What Ike Allen and Andy Anderson have created at Avaya is what the world needs.
Hello, Avaya family. I'm Andy Anderson. My partner, Ike Allen, and I are teachers, mentors, and the co-owners of Avaya University. Avaya is the creator of over 1,000 books, films, courses, teachings, and other supportive resources. Thank you, as always, for joining us. Our fellow teacher, Candace Plator, is back with us today to talk about self-respect, the antidote to self-betrayal and self-deception. Candace is an addictions therapist in private practice, where she specializes in working with the family and other loved ones of people who are struggling with addiction in her unique and signature family addiction counseling and therapy program. As a former addict with almost, I'm not sure how long, 34 years or 35?
I'll be 35 next month in July.
There you go. Almost 35 years clean and sober. Candace has learned that overcoming addiction is a family condition. Everyone in the family is affected by addiction and everyone needs to heal. For more than 3 decades, she has been helping both addicts and their loved ones understand their dysfunctional behaviors and make healthier life choices. Welcome back to Avaya, Candace.
Thanks, Andy. It's really good to be here. I think I've been here maybe 4 times now or something.
I think at least. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, yeah, when I saw the 34, I was like, wait, it's probably longer now. So since it's been longer. A little while. Well, thank you so much for doing this again. And I love it if we start talking about abandonment or betrayal, abandonment, deception, all these different the topics we're discussing today. And what would you say is the most common self-talk when we feel like we've been betrayed, deceived, abandoned?
Yeah, it's probably different for everybody, but I think there is a commonality. And one of the commonalities for sure is people say to themselves, what did I do? What did I do wrong? What's wrong with me? Why do people treat me like this? So they go into the shame, guilt spiral of thinking that it's about them somehow. I think I'll talk probably more about that a bit later. But I think that's the self-talk, that there's something wrong with me. And so the variations of that is what we tell ourselves usually.
Yeah, interesting.
Not a good thing to do.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. I think a lot of us tend to go into some kind of shame cycle. Why do you think that is? Why do you think we go right there? Why do we immediately think, oh, this must be something's wrong with me?
Because I think the other piece is if I was better, different, thisser or thater, this wouldn't be happening to me. So it must have something to do with me. It must be me. And I don't know what I did. And so it doesn't make sense. It doesn't compute.
Right.
Until it does. And maybe today we'll start helping people make sense of it.
Right. So let's talk a little bit about after someone has been betrayed. And I mean, this could be betrayal in so many different ways, right? We could talk about infidelity, betrayal in a family system with a colleague. You know, there's many different kinds of betrayals, but what are some coping mechanisms when someone has experienced that kind of betrayal, abandonment, deception? How do we cope with that? What do we do?
You know, it's such a hard thing to go through. People just feel so devastated when they feel abandoned or betrayed or deceived. It's so hard. And I've been through this myself a number of times in my lifetime. And I just recently went through something like this with a friend. So I know it feels really, really hard and kind of like it tears us up inside. And we feel like we're not good enough. If we were good enough, if we were better, he wouldn't have cheated on me, or this wouldn't be happening to me. So when people feel this way about themselves, I think when I realized that a friend had abandoned or had betrayed me, I think I ate a lot more chocolate that day, right? So I think we get into behaviors or substances that either squash down the feelings that we're having because they're so difficult, those feelings. We don't want to feel them. We look for something that's going to make us feel better. This is why we do that, because we think it's going to make us feel better. So we either don't want to think about it at all, so we might use something like drugs or alcohol to just blot it out. Or we might go to the mall and spend too much, or we might eat too much chocolate, or. There's so many things that we can do to blot it out. But I think that's the major coping mechanism for that trigger of feeling so awful about yourself.
Right.
Yeah.
And so obviously in the heat of the moment, in the beginning stages of healing from betrayal, right, it can be pretty intense. So what happens, I guess, if we don't deal with it, if we kind of cover it up with coping mechanisms and we don't really address how we feel, go through the steps of, I guess, the grief really that comes with something like that?
Yeah. And I love that question, because the way I see pain is that there are two kinds of pain. If we want to really boil it down, there are two kinds of pain. Excuse me. There's the kind of pain that just goes on and on and on and on and on and never stops. That kind of pain, just on and on. And that's how addiction really takes hold of people, is because there's no way to get it away from it, from the pain. So the other kind of pain hurts. It's not pleasant. It's hard, but there's a light at the end of the tunnel. We know that at some point we're going to feel better. And so we get to choose which kind of pain we'd rather have. So if we're going to choose the pain that goes on and on and on and on, then squashing it down is the way to go, because it'll never get better. And you'll just feel worse about yourself and worse about yourself. And you may even attract other people to you that hurt you and betray you, because you've got that energy going. You've got momentum going with that energy. But if you're willing to do the inner work that it takes to heal from something like this, then the pain can stop. And when you have somebody else in your life that starts to make, the way I want to say it, starts to make noises about abandonment and betrayal, you kind of have a minute to say, wait a minute, no, don't want that again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But that's only if you're doing the inner work. If you're busy squashing it down, then you don't have any time to do that. You're just going to feel badly about yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's such a good point. I love that you mentioned that, right, the two different kinds of pain, and the ones that, yes, just kind of linger on and on and on because we've never really dealt with what's happened or our grief, gone through the process of healing, as opposed to, yes, a very intense kind of pain, but going through it and processing, right? Processing what's happening. Yeah.
And coming out the other side of it so that you can live a life that you enjoy.
Right. Yeah. That's a beautifully said. I love that you mentioned that. And what would you say if we were to talk about, right, the truth about betrayal, the truth about deception? What would the truth be?
I think the truth is that it isn't about us. I think that when somebody has a need to behave in those ways, if some, like this situation with my friend, this is much more about her than it has anything to do with really me. I'm not saying I'm perfect at all, and I'm always willing to look at stuff if I'm being untoward. I want to know about that. But basically, people who treat us badly, that's about them. That isn't about us. That took me a really long time to understand. I grew up with a very narcissistic mother. I think I may have mentioned this in other summits that we've done together. And I always thought it was about me. All the things that she would do, all the behaviors that she had, and the way she was with me, I always thought it was about me. It was devastating to grow up that way. And then as an adult doing my inner work, what I realized is that really that was about her. It was about her need to behave in those ways, her need to feel better about herself by doing that. Right? And I think that there are many other ways that people can um, can heal trouble in their relationships. Certainly talking about something, being open, being honest, being real and authentic and genuine and attached, having some healthy attachment means that you don't have to betray somebody else. You don't have to be the person that's being betrayed or abandoned or deceived.
Right.
So there's lots of other roads that lead to a healthier Rome, lots of ways to not have to do that kind of behavior. But when somebody does that kind of behavior, they're not looking at those other roads. They're doing what they feel they have to do. And it isn't about us. It affects us. That's the thing. It affects us. And I felt very hurt, and people feel what they feel, but I didn't create that. And you didn't create that if you're being abandoned, betrayed, or deceived. The person that's doing that to you is not working on themselves.
Gotcha.
It doesn't have another way to express themselves or whatever.
Yeah. Yes, it's that old hurt people hurt people.
Hurt people hurt people.
Adage,
Yeah. And the other thing to understand is that when we are traumatized, it's not, and there's so many ways to be traumatized. It's often not really the trauma that's so difficult for us. It's the way we perceive the trauma. It's the way we look at how that affected us and hold on to that. We hold on to how that affected us more than we hold on to what the actual trauma was. Right. So again, I mean, I'm a therapist. I work mostly with addiction, but addiction covers so many different things. I really like getting underneath the pain that people have and figuring it out so they don't have to keep living with it. And if anybody out there is feeling a lot of pain right now, there's a way around that. There's that second kind of pain that can end, that will end. Right.
Yeah. And I want to also talk about self-respect, since that's something I know that you love to talk about. And
I do.
So how does self-respect come into this conversation of recovering from betrayal?
Yeah. Well, for me, there's a difference between self-esteem and self-respect. And most people use those terms interchangeably. I don't anymore. I think that self-esteem comes basically from the outside in. So Andy, if you were to say to me, "Oh, Candace, you're so wonderful, and I love your shirt, and your hair looks great," all the stuff that you might say to me, and I don't feel that way about myself, I'm not going to be able to let any of that in. In fact, I'm going to think you're kind of nuts to think that about me if I can't have it. So self-esteem comes from the outside in, and sometimes it doesn't even go in. It's compliments, it's strokes and validation that we may not believe about ourselves. But self-respect is the opposite. Self-respect comes from the inside out. And I believe that self-respect is the most important thing we either have or don't have. And for me, it's not negotiable anymore. I will not live without self-respect, but it takes some work to be able to have my self-respect. When I get hurt, sometimes my self-respect goes away and I think, I must be this terrible, horrible person. And I go back into that place. But the way, I can imagine that there are people listening thinking, well, how do I get self-respect? Which is a wonderful question, because you can't go buy it at the 7-Eleven, and I can't give you yours. It's an inside job. You can't give me mine. The way that it's developed is by doing the next right thing, and then the next right thing after that, and then the next right thing, the things that make us feel proud of ourselves, that allow us to pat ourselves on the back, that we feel good when we do those things. That is self-respect. And when we start to feel it, then there's an energy that comes from us, that comes out from us, and people see it. People feel it, because energy is real, even if you can't see it or, touch it, it's real. And when we don't respect ourselves, other people kind of know that just by the way we talk about ourselves, or we dress ourselves, or we, people know that we don't respect ourselves. And sometimes they don't respect us because we're not respecting ourselves. Kind of like, if I'm not respecting myself, why should anybody else respect me? So we need to do that work, and living that way is so much better. And again, this has not been my whole life, because when you're in addiction, in active addiction, it's the antithesis of self-respect. Right? So I had to do the inner work that it takes, and wanting to feel good about myself. So when we're feeling good about ourselves, we don't usually, in my experience, have that betrayal and that abandonment and that deception very much. I was blown away when the incident happened with my friend, because that just doesn't happen to me very often anymore. So it used to, but it doesn't anymore. So, life is what it is, but I know how to take care of myself now with things like this, because I respect myself. And, if I could talk about trust and self-trust for a minute,
That'd be great.
because again, a lot of people think that trust is about the other person. Like, I'm going to trust them, I don't trust them. Trust isn't really about the other person. Trust is about ourselves. It's about knowing that whatever happens, we're going to take care of it. We're going to take care of ourselves. It relates back to self-respect. I respect myself enough to take care of myself, to make sure things are okay in my life. It's not about trusting the other person. We want to be able to feel like we can trust somebody, of course. But ultimately, trust is about trusting ourselves. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah. And it's it's an important one to bring up with it when it comes to betrayal, because, right, if someone's, let's say, experienced an infidelity, there's obviously a big, huge lack of trust with that person. But at the same time, right, then bringing in self-trust is a whole other level of, right, what's happened.
Yeah. But you know what? That's true. And when I look at what happened with my friend, there's a trust issue there for me with her now, right? So when I come back to self-trust, what I know is that I'm really going to take care of myself. I'm not sure I'm going to stay in that friendship. I'm not sure how that's going to work out, but it may be that I don't, because I'm going to take care of me. And if I don't feel good about what's happening with somebody else, I'm going to make sure I'm taking care of me. And that's the ultimate trust piece. It's hard to trust somebody. It's so hard to trust somebody else when they've hurt us.
Yeah. And that also leads me to the topic of self-betrayal, because that was part of your title today. And I love that. Can you talk a little bit about, like, what is self-betrayal and why it's important that we don't obviously betray ourselves?
Yeah, I'm reminded of that saying, hurt me once or fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. I don't like the word shame, and I don't like that concept, but that saying, it's like, if I stay in a relationship, a friendship, whatever it is, a job, whatever, if I stay there when I've been betrayed and there isn't work being done around working through the betrayal so that both people can feel okay, I'm betraying me. I'm abandoning me. I'm putting myself back in a situation where I could be hurt.
Right.
And that's on me, right? When we have infidelity in a relationship, which is for so many people the ultimate experience of betrayal, it's horrible, horrible. The only way that can really be fixed, that I can see, is for the person who did the deception, the betrayal, to really get it, to really understand how much that hurt the other person, how difficult that was for the other person, and own that. When we don't see that person who hurt us owning it, how can we ever trust them to not do it to us again? Right? So there is work to be done sometimes with a betrayal like that. Things can work out, and sometimes the relationship can get a lot stronger as a result of it. But both people have to be able to be willing to work it through and to really own their own stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's definitely an important thing to keep in mind, because I know probably a lot of people watching right now maybe have had that, are in that experience right now and wondering, oh, should I stay or should I go? And all of those kinds of questions coming up for them. And I think it's important, that distinction of making sure that work is being done. So it's not just, I'm going to let it go and see what happens.
So should I stay or should I go? Should I stay in a relationship of any kind where the person isn't owning their stuff, isn't working through their own stuff to understand why they had the need to betray? If you do that, that's certainly a choice that anybody can make, and a lot of people make it. They rationalize, they minimize, they do all those things so that they can stay. And sometimes it's because they have children and there are situations, right? But if we choose to stay in a relationship where we've been abandoned, betrayed, or deceived, when that work isn't being done, you can basically be assured that your pain will not end anytime soon. So that's a choice. Knowing that, I think, might make it a little easier to make that choice, hopefully.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Good point for people who are like in that state right now. And I'm curious too. So, right, we've talked about the different kinds of pain, and obviously addressing this pain that comes from betrayal is so important in order to actually not feel it later. So what do you think recovery actually looks like from a betrayal? Like, how does that work? What's the process that we go through to heal from this?
Well, the process is different for everybody, but again, it's around getting some help from somebody skilled who knows how to get you there. But I think recovery from this, again, has to do with the self more than it has to do with the other person. And for me, it would be about having boundaries and having consequences with those boundaries that mean something to the other person. So I get that you've betrayed me, you've hurt me. This has been very difficult for me. If you're willing to do the work that it takes for us to move past this, then that's great. But if this happens again, if anything like this ever happens again, if I even think it's going to happen again, I'm not staying here. So that's going to be my consequences. I'm going to be leaving the relationship, the friendship. I will take myself away from situations that will continue to hurt me. And I think that's self-respect, and that's what recovery looks like. Mm-hmm. It's, I will take care of me. I will learn how to trust me. And I will let you know what's going to happen if you try this behavior again, because I don't want to play anymore.
Right.
Not fun.
Yeah, that's a very good point, to hold strong in that boundary. And yes, honor yourself, respect yourself, to the point of honoring that. Absolutely. And not going back on your word.
Yeah, because if you set a boundary with a consequence attached to it, or if you set a boundary that doesn't have a consequence, and that just kind of becomes just words. People don't pay attention to it anymore. She said she would leave me the last time I did this, but she's still here, so I can do this again.
Right.
So Dr. Phil, who most people know, he says some good things. And one of the things he says is that we teach other people how to treat us. We teach other people how to treat us. If somebody hurts you and you stay in that, you're basically teaching that person that it's okay to hurt you.
Right.
You don't mean to, you don't want to, but that's basically the message that that person's going to get. If you're not going to take care of yourself, then I can just cheat on you again,
Right.
or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. Very, very good point in that. The Dr. Philisms.
Yeah, Dr. Phil, how's that been working for you? He says.
Right. Been a long time since I watched that show, but yes, I remember.
Yeah, no, I don't either. But I just know that he has some good things that have become philisms, and they're pretty accurate.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
that's one of them. I like that one.
Yeah, absolutely. And here's another question for you. This is kind of just like a general question about betrayal. What do you think betrayal can teach us about ourselves?
Well, I think it can teach us what we've been talking about. It can teach us, how do we want to feel about ourselves? This kind of experience or situation, we can either sort of crawl into a hole and become really passive about it and depressed about it and all of that stuff, when it's really about the other person. We don't need to do that to ourselves. Or we can stand up and say, you know what? I'm not doing this again. This will not happen again. I will stay with you, but if you do it again, I'm out of here, or I'm out of here now, But I think it teaches us, what's that Eleanor Roosevelt saying, that a woman doesn't know how, a woman is like a tea bag. Woman is like a tea bag. She doesn't know how strong she is until she's in hot water.
Gotcha.
So these kinds of experiences in life, and I think 99.99999% of us go through these experiences at some point in our lives. And if you're experiencing something like this, if somebody's cheated on you or hurt you, or please know that you're not alone, and there's no shame in that. Just reach out for help if you need it. But most of us have been there, and it really can teach you how to be stronger within yourself. I wish I had known that many decades ago. That would have been helpful, but I'm very grateful that I know it now. And it can really strengthen us and sort of toughen ourselves up. I don't mean that we become tough, but we will look after ourselves. We will respect ourselves. We will not allow this to happen in our lives. We'll do everything we can to not let it happen.
Right. Yes, actually.
Because we care about ourselves. We care about the other person. But if the other person's behaving like a jerk, well, all bets are off. I'm gonna choose me.
Yes. Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you. I appreciate you sharing about that. And I'm wondering too, before we start wrapping up, could you talk a little bit about betrayal as it relates to addiction, since that's your, specialty, and you work with so many people around that, right? I would imagine if people watching right now have maybe a partner who has an addiction, that can be feeling like a betrayal in and of itself. Any thoughts there on how to manage that?
Yeah, probably lots of them if I give myself some time, but yeah. When somebody is in active addiction, whether it's a mind-altering substance or a mood-altering behavior like gambling or shopping or gaming or something, they just can't be emotionally available to you. It just can't happen because they're busy being self-absorbed in the addiction, and they don't really care that much about anything else because they're focused on the addiction. So when people are, especially things like mind-altering addiction and substances that make us behave in ways that we probably wouldn't behave in if we weren't putting poison into our brains and into our systems, that's often when betrayal happens, especially the marital kind of betrayal of cheating. And people go out and get drunk and find somebody to have sex with. They wouldn't normally do that, but addiction or that kind of substance abuse can lead to things like that. And I think also when we've got that poison in us, we can become a lot more aggressive than we usually are. So somebody who's been drinking, or depending on the behavior or whatever, it just becomes meaner and nastier and says things and is verbally abusive and emotionally abusive, that's, or maybe physically or maybe sexually abusive. And the other piece of that is what I was saying before, is that when we're really hurting, addiction, or not even addiction, but just using something to squash the pain down, just feels like such a good idea. It's so tempting.
Mm-hmm.
It isn't really, because then you have to deal with that as well. And if it felt good to drink once when somebody was betraying you or abandoning you, the next time anything like that happens, you'll probably drink again. The habit will form, the addiction will form. You'll need more and more of it because there's tolerance and progression. It's just not a good idea. If you can make the decision that you want to stay emotionally available to yourself and work through this and find somebody who can help you, I think that's a better idea.
Yes.
So I wish that for any of you who are going through this and thinking about that.
Yeah, thank you for addressing that. I think that's so important for people going through that very specific thing as it relates to betrayal and addiction. Let's talk a little bit more about how people can learn more about you. I know you have a book, you have a website, resources, consults,
Yes,
all sorts of stuff.
all kinds of stuff. So I work as an addictions therapist in private practice in Vancouver, Canada, which is a beautiful place. And I work primarily with families that are being impacted by somebody's addiction in their family, because there's an awful lot of help out there for addicts. There's so much help out there. There's very little help for the families who love them and are struggling and suffering right alongside them. And the addicts have the advantage of either using a substance to not have to deal with anything, or using a behavior to not have to deal with anything, but the loved ones are feeling everything, So I do have a book. I have two that I'll show you. And both of them have won awards, which was very surprising to me, because I was basically an opioid addict for 15 years. The doctors kept prescribing these drugs for me for my Crohn's disease, and I didn't know what was happening until I became suicidal. So to think about, at that point, to be thinking that I could ever do anything to help the world was, I never thought that. But my books have won awards. So this is Loving an Addict, Loving Yourself. It's the top 10 survival tips for loving someone with an addiction. And this is the workbook that goes with it. So that's another alternative for you. If you don't want to see a counselor, you can work through the workbook and try to determine what it is that has made you not respect yourself. Right? So this book is for the loved ones. It's not for the addicts. If you get a copy of this book, don't give it to your addict to read, because they hate my book. Because I'm talking about boundaries and consequences, and addicts hate that. So don't give it to your addict. So read it for yourself. And if you want to contact me, my business is called Love with Boundaries, because we need to love with boundaries. And we give free, no obligation at all, 30-minute Zoom consultation calls. So if you want to talk to us to see what's going on for you, how we might be able to help you, we work primarily on Zoom, and so we can reach people all over the world. As long as you can speak English, we can help you, right? So the way to get in touch with us is I'm going to be giving Andy a link for a questionnaire. It's pretty short. It's not one of those long questionnaires. Just fill in the questionnaire. Let us know a little bit about what's happening for you. As soon as you submit it, we will get back to you right away as soon as we can. We know that addiction doesn't wait. And sometimes addiction looks like life and death. And so we don't wait either. We get in touch with you right away. We'll schedule the call. You see whether you want to work with us, whether we're a fit for you, and off we go.
Well, thank you so much. We so appreciate you offering that for people.
And there's a free chapter of my book that you can get. There'll be a link for that too, right?
Yes. Many
Yes.
links.
Many links.
Many links to all of your goodies. And I really appreciate that consult opportunity for people to take advantage of. That was very sweet of you. So yes. Do you have any last insights before we wrap up, Candace?
I think the one that I really like to give is, please don't give up. Don't give up on yourself. You don't necessarily have to give up on your relationship quite yet if somebody's been hurting you. You can, of course, if it's really bad, but don't give up on yourself. Don't give up. Get some help. Find out, let's get underneath this. Let's find out why you're putting yourself in those positions in the first place so that you can change that. When we have the self-awareness of why we're doing what we're doing, then we can change things.
Right. Yes, we definitely need that first.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Candace. It's always great talking with you, and I really appreciate you sharing with our Avaya family today.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Bye.
And thank you, Avaya family, for showing up for yourself and loving yourself enough to just be here and listen and absorb all of this amazing wisdom. So thank you for being here, and we'll see you again soon. Take care. Hey, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for this last class with Candace Plator. She was back with us today to talk about self-respect, the antidote to self-betrayal and self-deception. I thought this was a really great conversation. I love that we talked about self-respect, something that Candace is an expert at talking about. And I think it's just so important for you to take a look at, what does self-respect mean to you, right? If you're in the experience right now of having had a betrayal, a deception, and abandonment, all those kinds of things, what is it that you need to do for you that's going to be respectful for you? Right? That's going to help you do the next right thing in your life, whether it's staying with a relationship or not staying with a relationship, or waiting and doing some healing, or whatever it is. Just take a little inventory for yourself and start figuring out what self-respect is to you. How is it that you can be respectful of yourself in this journey? Because it is so very important that you are, because this is a tough journeys to be dealing with and healing from these kinds of big traumas in our lives. So important that you're loving yourself, you're respecting yourself, and making sure that you're doing the work to heal. So thank you so much for joining us, everyone. We will see you again soon. Take care.
Avaya has changed my life.
Avaya has made me the woman I am today.
Avaya is my home.
Avaya is personal freedom.
Avaya is the reason my life continuously improves.
Let everyone in your life know about Avaya.
Everyone needs to know about this amazing company.
Thank you, Avaya, for appearing in my inbox.
What Ike Allen and Andy Anderson have created at Avaya is what the world needs.